Systematic reviews are the backbone of evidence-based progress in education, offering clarity in complex and rapidly evolving fields such as open distance and digital education, or ODDE, and artificial intelligence in education, or AIED. In his keynote speech, Professor Olaf Zawacki Richter, Professor of Educational Technology at the University of Oldenburg, Germany, highlights the growing importance of systematic reviews and the challenges of research quality and replicability. He underscores the need for educator involvement, interdisciplinary collaboration, and ethical reflection to ensure AI solutions truly enhance teaching and learning.
Thank you very much for inviting me to this important conference. Thank you very much for your hospitality. This is my first time here in Hong Kong. I feel very honored and pleased to give this keynote here today to provide some insights from systematic reviews with regard to research and practice in ODDE, Open Distance and Digital Education, and AIED, Artificial Intelligence in Education. First, let me give you an overview of our agenda. My presentation has 3 parts, and we will proceed in a funnel-like manner from the more general, broader topics to the more specific issues related to the topic. In my first part, I would like to begin by laying some foundations and describing the terminology of our field as Open Distance and Digital Education, ODDE. I was invited to speak here about research areas and research trends in ODDE. And to gain a solid overview of a certain research topic, systematic reviews are an excellent way to achieve this. There is a general trend towards systematic reviews in ODDE and education in general, and I will provide an overview of the content, but also the quality of systematic reviews that are conducted in our field. Not surprisingly, the research area of AI in education, AIED, is very prominently coming to the fore now. So in the second part, we zoom down and will focus on the content of systematic reviews in AIED specifically, from the first systematic review in 2019 up to the present, and in doing so we will also uncover some research gaps. And then in the last part, we will move from the level of systematic reviews as secondary research and their implications for empirical primary research to a study in which pedagogical scenarios for the use of AI in higher education were developed. And finally, of course, we will finish with some concluding remarks and implications for research in ODDE. First, I would like to elaborate a little bit on the terminology of ODDE and the roots where we are coming from, also this institution here. And by that I mean the theory and practice of distance education. The man who invented the term distance education is Professor Otto Peters. He was the founding rector in 1974 of the Fernuniversität in Hagen, which is Germany's distance teaching open university. I had the privilege to be his last doctoral student. In the 1960s, Otto Peters was working at the DIF, the German Institute of Distance Education Research at the University of Tübingen, and he was the director of the Department of Distance Education Abroad. And in this capacity, he had to prepare also meetings of the ministers of education of countries from the European Commission who were preparing the establishment of open universities in Europe. In those papers, he used this term distance education because correspondence education at that time had not the best reputation in Europe. So he was looking for a new term for distance education at the higher education level. Last year, I interviewed him at the age of 96. He is still living in the city of Hagen. And if you're interested in learning more about his story and the invention of the term distance education after World War II in Europe, you find it published open access in the American Journal of Distance Education. I think we should call for more historical research on distance education to benefit from decades of research in this field when we integrate new and emerging educational technologies in our teaching operations. Sometimes I have a déjà vu. For example, I found this book title in my shelf, Delivering Digitally, Managing the Transition to the Knowledge Media. The chapters in the book on the development of digital higher education or e-learning were dealing with the same issues that are often discussed today, now in the mainstream of online digital teaching and learning. And when do you think this book was published? It was published in 1999. In order not to reinvent the wheel, we should be aware of this huge body of research in open and distance education, as also Yun-Hong Chow writes, knowing the history can inform evidence-based practices in newer forms of digital education. To provide a solid and comprehensive overview of the broad field of ODDE, we published an open access handbook of ODDE in Springer's major reference series in early 2024. It has 80 chapters written by more than 120 authors from 25 countries. And with digital education in the mainstream of teaching and learning, I believe that we have to think about terminology that goes beyond open and distance education without ignoring or even denying its roots. And therefore, we decided to choose ODDE as the title for our handbook, combining open and distance education to clearly mark the historical origin, and digital education to capture newer manifestations of teaching and learning with digital media in the process of the overall digital transformation of educational institutions. We conceptualized ODDE as an overarching term to refer to all kinds of learning and teaching processes in which the knowledge base and skill base of educational technology, digital media and tools are used to present and deliver content, as well as facilitate and support communication, interaction, collaboration, assessment and evaluation. So ODDE is not monolithic in form. It includes various types from technology-enhanced education to flipped learning and blended learning to fully online education. The various chapters are organized according to the so-called 3M framework of research areas in ODDE with the macro, meso, and micro levels relating to ODDE systems and theories on the macro level, issues related to educational management on the institutional meso level, and individual learning and teaching processes on the micro level. We also found in various bibliographic studies that most research is carried out on the micro level of teaching and learning in ODDE, because most researchers, of course, are educators dealing with issues related to teaching and learning. But in contrast, there is a clear gap in research areas on the meso and macro levels. I will come back to this later. So that being said, let's move on to our topic of research synthesis and research trends in ODDE. To trace thematic trends in research and practice, I have conducted several content analysis with text mining tools of leading journals, like 35 years of the SSCI journal Distance Education, published in Australia, or 40 years of Computers and Education. The map that you see here is based on articles in the journal Distance Education over 35 years. It shows that the journal is, of course, about research into education, the big red bubble there. And the major focus is placed on students and learning, which is connected via the thematic region of interaction, the purple small bubble there. Obviously, this makes a lot of sense, as learning in any context is a social activity, and the research and practice of distance education have always been dealing with providing opportunities for interaction and communication and collaboration between and among learners, teachers, and the teaching institution using educational technologies. The following observation is very interesting. This is from the chapter about research trends in the handbook. There have always been alternating waves of research in ODDE. Using the 3M framework again, there was a trigger on the meso or macro levels. For example, the foundation of distance teaching universities and their institutional consolidation in the 1970s, early 80s, and quality problems that emerged with their growth, and a response on the micro level with research addressing issues related to instructional design and the design of student support systems. And now the next wave is coming, ever more powerful AI applications and the availability of big data and the opportunity to design adaptive, personalized, intelligent support systems at scale, hopefully. But I do not want to be overly optimistic at this point. I already mentioned that more and more systematic reviews are conducted in our field, with the ever-growing number of research publications to gain an overview of the body of knowledge and also to identify gaps and priority areas in research. The great advantage of systematic reviews is that they are reproducible because they follow a systematic process and protocols. The whole search strategy and procedure are documented so that the reviews can be replicated and updated, which is of course very important in such a dynamic field like AIED. So to look at the landscape of systematic reviews in our field of ODDE, we carried out an umbrella review or a review of reviews to analyze the content of these reviews and also to do a quality check of the reviews. It was published early this year in the journal Review of Education. And here we evaluated 576 systematic reviews in the area of ODDE alone in 5 years from 2018 to 2022. And you see the increase in the number of published systematic reviews in our field here. Systematic reviews also seem to be quite popular among Chinese researchers. The majority of the included systematic reviews were coming from China, followed by the USA and Spain. A quarter of all systematic reviews originated from these 3 countries. In total, they were coming from 70 countries. And of course, we tried our hardest to improve the situation of Germany a little bit, which is on the 8th rank with Canada and Singapore. An overall analysis, again with the text mining tool Leximancer, was run with titles and abstracts of all the 576 articles. The results are depicted in so-called concept map, based on relative locations of concepts in the text that form a thematic region. The map shows 5 thematic areas: education and the COVID experience, learning design, effectiveness, AIED, and flipped learning. Given the chosen time period of 2018 to 22, it is no surprise that many reviews, over 53 of them, dealt with experiences of emergency remote online learning and teaching during the COVID-19 pandemic. But we see on the 2nd rank AIED already with 46 systematic reviews. The introduction of AI methods and tools in ODDE is probably the most dynamic and growing field of educational technology application and research, and not limited to the release of ChatGPT in November 22 and other generative AI applications. The majority of AIED research is conducted in higher education settings, but there are more and more applications on the K-12 school levels. Before I finish this part, I would like to say a few words about the methodological quality of these systematic reviews. I don't want to go into detail here, or can't, but we calculated a quality index score that ranges between 0 and 100. Regrettably, we found that the overall quality of the systematic reviews is only on a medium level and can be quite low in some cases. This leads, of course, to reduced replicability and trustworthiness of the systematic reviews. Buntines and colleagues found the same in a meta-analysis of 361 systematic reviews in educational technology research. They found that complete replication was possible only in a total of 16 studies, and this is quite a disappointing result. And finally, our results are also mirrored by a recent analysis of 66 AIED systematic reviews by Bond and colleagues. So we see that more and more systematic reviews are carried out, but the method is relatively new in our field, and we can conclude that some researchers still might need proper methodological training. The method and the gold standards come from medicine and the health sciences to synthesize research evidence, to inform evidence-based practice, also, of course, with quantitative meta-analysis. But we in the social and educational sciences try to describe a reality with a complex interplay of various independent and dependent variables. So we need special approaches in our field. We humbly tried to fill this gap a little bit and published another open access book about systematic reviews in educational research. Now I would like to zoom into research synthesis in AIED and the opportunities and challenges that they might afford for ODDE. We published the first systematic reviews on AIED in a special issue of the International Journal of Educational Technology in Higher Education, the ETHE journal, that was edited by Tony Bates and colleagues. And this was the call for papers with the question, can artificial intelligence transform higher education? So maybe I had the right gut feeling to do this already in 2018 and 2022, which is of course ages ago in such a dynamic field like AI. Among other things, we developed a framework of AI applications in higher education, which is kind of a reference point now. So the first systematic review addressed the following review questions regarding authorship and publication patterns, the definition of AIED ethical implications, challenges and risks, and most importantly, to describe the nature and scope of AI applications in education. In this review, we only looked at applications in higher education because we only found studies in this context. More than 98% of the studies were conducted in higher education settings at that time. At this time, we found only 146 studies on AI in higher education from 2007. In an update, we see how this developed in terms of the number of research publications. The field is growing exponentially. I want to highlight just three main results of this initial systematic review of AIED. First is the framework regarding the scope of AI applications. We identified four main categories of AI applications with 18 subdomains. The first is profiling and prediction, or learner analytics, to cluster students according to their profile, and learning performance to predict academic achievement, dropout, and retention. The second is adaptive systems, to recommend personalized content and to support teachers in learning and teaching design. Then intelligent tutoring systems to diagnose strengths or gaps in knowledge and providing automated feedback. And finally, applications in the area of assessment and evaluation for automated grading and feedback. Second, we found that the field is highly dominated, or was highly dominated, by colleagues from STEM disciplines. Less than 10% of the included studies were led by educators or psychologists. And that's why we asked, where are the educators in the title of our article? Of course, educators have to be involved in interdisciplinary projects to develop meaningful applications for teaching and learning. And third, only 2 out of the 146 articles considered any ethical implications, challenges, or risks of applying AI in education. Keeping that in mind, I would like to come back to our umbrella review, where the content analysis showed that AIED formed a thematic region of its own with 46 systematic reviews between 2018 and 22. Bonn's meta-analysis, or AI review, already included 66 up to July 23, which is, again, already 2 years ago. In contrast to our 2018 systematic review, Bond and colleagues found that many studies are now also addressing the challenges of AI in education, like issues related to questions of curriculum development, technical infrastructure, or the need of professional development for teachers and faculty members. 5 years after Tony Bates' ETHE special issue, colleagues from the Center for Open Education Research edited a new AIED special issue, where also Bonn's meta-review was published. But given the enormously rapid development, this all gets outdated quite quickly. So what happened in the last 2 years? In preparing for this conference, I checked out the Scopus database on June 15 with our search string and found 56 more systematic reviews in the last 2 years. There is also now a critical mass of AIED studies in K-12. I found 10 systematic reviews that were focused only on K-12 school settings. So what are the research topics that are covered in the new systematic reviews on AIED? Of course, the major development that occurred in this time is the release of ChatGPT and new advances around generative AI applications. The majority of systematic reviews are dealing with this emerging area of AI applications, which indicates that there's already an abundance of research articles published in this very short time. The field is kind of exploding. Large language models are, of course, also a prerequisite for powerful chatbots that can be used in teaching or for advising students. We found 3 systematic reviews on this topic, and it is also encouraging that there are now numerous studies addressing ethical questions, challenges, and risks related to AI integration in higher education and teaching, as well as in university administration. 2 systematic reviews provide a very good overview of this topic. I want to highlight these last mentioned studies, as the ethics and risks of AI integration used to be the most neglected area, as we saw in our first systematic review. Karen and colleagues synthesized potential risks in school education and categorized them into 6 areas: privacy and autonomy risks, AI biases, accuracy and functional risks, deepfakes and fate risks, which stands for fairness, accountability, transparency, and ethics, social knowledge and skill building risks, and risks in shifting the teacher's role. In the previous year, or in the year before, Memarian and Dolek also focused on fate risks and their theoretical foundations and definitions. It is really remarkable how many studies have been published since the release of ChatGPT and other generative AI applications. This is also reflected in the growing number of the systematic review. How a systematic review secondary analysis can serve as a starting point for new primary research. The reviews can help to identify significant research gaps, that point directly to areas that need further theory development or empirical investigation. Building on our first systematic review on AIED, I would like to finish by giving some insights into a research project that was funded by the Volkswagen Foundation in Germany from 2022 to 2024. One key finding of the systematic review was that AIED projects originally involved very few educators or psychologists. In this project, we therefore asked ourselves, how could we develop pedagogical, meaningful scenarios for the use of AI in education, what these might look like, and how could we use them as a basis for a discussion with educators, develop them further, and have them evaluated by faculty members coming from the humanities and STEM disciplines. We conducted focus group discussions with educators from STEM and the social sciences in various countries, as you can see here. Using a specific scenario development method, we created one scenario for each field of application described in our systematic review. You remember this framework of the 4 areas. To do this, we first identified so-called overarching strategy elements from the literature, such as access to data, funding, the role of the developers, the role of teachers, and the scope of the applications. Within these dimensions, there are then specific courses of action, so-called future options. And based on these strategy elements and future options, it is possible to outline special path of actions that describe a likely scenario. I would like now to briefly present one of such scenario using the examples of automated grading systems. Imagine the following. An automated essay scoring system is implemented in an introductory course in your field. The system is recommended for courses with large classes and is trained with a subset of essays that are hand-marked by teachers. These hand-marked essays can be randomly sampled from the submitted essays or reused from a previous year. The system then analyzes the remaining unmarked essays and automatically assigns a grade to each essay. To evaluate the system's performance, some essays are flagged for teachers to review. The system was developed by a private company. It is provided to your institution for a reduced subscription cost in exchange for pseudonymized student essays that the company uses to improve the system's performance. In total, we developed 4+1 scenarios, a 5th one specifically addressing generative AI applications, which had their breakthrough during this time period. And these scenarios were then discussed with the educators in the focus groups. After the focus groups, we also surveyed the educators using a questionnaire. What I'm showing here is work in progress from a pilot survey of just over 100 educators. 89% of them had used AI in teaching within the past 6 months, and they were mainly coming from Germany, Japan, Spain, and Turkey. In the questionnaire, we presented each of the 5 scenarios and then asked whether such an application would make their work easier, whether they thought it would improve learning for students, whether the legal framework in their country would permit such use, if they had ethical concerns, if they would trust the system and its developers with regard to data security, and whether they would generally support and endorse the use of such a system. If we take another look at the automated essay scoring scenario, we can see that while educators generally believe that such a system would make their lives easier, there are clear doubts regarding data security and ethical concerns related to the system and the edtech companies behind it. Opinions are therefore divided. And overall, as you can see on the far right, just over half of the respondents would support the use of such a system. When we break down the results by subject area, we see that greater acceptance is coming from educators in the STEM fields. And there are also significant differences between countries. In Germany, there is considerable skepticism concerning the security of digital technologies and media. Only 14% of educators would support the introduction of an AES system as described in the scenario, in contrast to 71% in Japan. And these concerns in Germany were also a major issue during online remote learning and the COVID-19 pandemic. When we compare the overall acceptance across the 5 scenarios, it becomes clear that the area of automated grading is viewed most critically overall. On the other hand, there is near unanimous agreement on the question of whether educators should receive better training in the use of AI. There is a strong perceived need in this area. With these little insights from an empirical project that emerged from a clearly defined research gap identified in a systematic review, I would like to conclude and briefly elaborate on some implications. Digital education has now entered the mainstream, and the recent developments in AIED are reflected in thousands of publications. Weidlich and colleagues caution us against rushing headlong into the pressure to publish. They speak of fast science, and I would like to quote them here. Yet, alongside these intrinsic motivations, external incentives can drive the rush to publish hasty, preliminary work. While propelling individual careers, fast science generates research waste, propagates errors, and can lead to overload and anxiety. Robust science, on the other hand, begins with deeply thinking about the questions of interest, features clear definitions of concepts, emphasizes attention to details, and it is critical. While these ideals are universal, the current rush to explore generative AI in education amplifies the urgency of slowing down. We should not be over-enthusiastic about the limitless digital age. There are already calls for digital degrowth, as in the new book by Neil Selwyn. I think I showed that systematic review offers the opportunity to gain an overview of existing knowledge and to critically assess the quality of knowledge production. They can support the conduct of robust research, provided that we also pay close attention to the quality of the systematic reviews themselves in the field of ODDE. With regard to new technological developments, I also told that we need more research at the macro and meso levels in the light of the digital transformation of educational systems and the institutional implementation of educational technologies in order to inform evidence-based practice. In responding to this need, I would like to announce the foundation of a new journal. It is a diamond open access journal. No publication fees are charged. The Journal of Open Distance and Digital Education, ODDE, that aims to publish research within institutional systems or policy level. So articles on the micro level, for example, micro level practice, evaluating the impact of single teaching and learning interventions without an institutional dimension or system dimension, are not within the scope of ODDE. we launched this Diamond Open Access journal with a very international editorial team covering all continents on Earth in August 24. And that being said, I thank you very much for your attention.